Very interesting times at BYU over the weekend as a contract extension for Kalani was announced. It was interesting the sense of urgency that happened. And as we've told you over the last couple of weeks, BYU and Kalani have been talking for some time. Really, I think this all goes all the way back to USC. But as more jobs became open, Washington in particular, then Oregon, Kalani Sitake interviewing for the Oregon job, as we told you he had, that's where this sense of urgency came from. So the question is, Jake, what happens now? And are you surprised at the timing of this extension?
No, I mean, so I think to the timing question, I'm not surprised by the timing. I think that BYU ratcheted up the urgency once Kalani's opportunities started to mount, which isn't surprising. But I think that again, as we discussed last week on the show, I think that Kalani is a maybe once in a lifetime is a bit strong, but he is a very rare bird for BYU to be able to have. He's somebody who fits into the lifestyle perfectly. He lives all the values. Like, he's everything you want in BYU's head coach. So the idea that there would even be a minute chance that he would be leaving for a Pac-12 school or whatever just was terrifying. And then where does BYU go from here? Well, now I think the expectations are sort of, not only are they reset, but I also think they're raised. I think now that Kalani has the extension and his staff is taken care of and everything's good to go, well, now you got to start winning more football games now. And I think that starts obviously in your bowl game, which BYU fans hate. But then I also think that you gotta look forward, and you gotta think about now this transition to the Big 12 is coming. And that really is where I think the extension comes into play, because if you roll into the Big 12 in your
Yes.
first season and you fall flat on your face, that's not going to look too good. I mean, you at least have to be competitive and hopefully competing for that conference. So I think that's really the next major step for this team.
Well, and I also think there's a conversation to be had about BYU doing business differently than they ever have. And I think that's a big part of this. I look at Kalani, and I think one of the things that BYU recognizes is that there's not a whole lot of, and what's the right way to say this? There's not a whole lot of guys that are qualified to do what Kalani Sitake does for BYU. And we've talked about this, I feel like, endlessly on this show, that it's not easy to find guys to be the head coach at BYU.
Right.
It is a very particular set of circumstances. And I think what's so interesting is Tom Homo clearly wanted this done a month ago.
Hmm.
He did not want Kalani Sitake talking to Washington and Oregon. But maybe that's what was needed to get an extension done for Kalani. Because my fear is, had they not extended Kalani Sitake, BYU would have lost him. There's no question about that. I don't think he would have taken the Oregon job because, I was told over the weekend that the reason the Oregon interview, and there are stories out there about how the Oregon interview went horribly and he tanked it. Kalani didn't tank that interview. He didn't do horribly.
Right.
He was asked a simple question. Hey, coach, if we offer you this job, would your preference be to take the job at Oregon, or would your preference be to stay at BYU? And Kalani Sitake flatly said, oh, there's no question I'd rather be at BYU. Well, that's the end of the road for Oregon. I mean, I think Kalani knew that. But I also think he knew that interviewing for a program that is at the height and the level of the Oregon Ducks gave him some leverage.
Yeah.
And really that's what it took to move Kalani Sitake and BYU forward in extension talks. And Jake, I think he handled it brilliantly.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was exactly how you would coach somebody to leverage a business situation, which is exactly what this was. Like, let's not get this confused. This wasn't a, oh my God, BYU loves Kalani so much and they're just going to do whatever it takes to re-sign him. I mean, I think this was a negotiation. I think this was something where BYU was a little hesitant to pay the staff, or to kind of iron out all those wrinkles, if you will, that are in the fine print. And I think I specifically remember you saying, I think it was early last week, that there was a little bit of some impatience from Kalani's side.
Yeah.
Not that he was frustrated, but just some like, hey, like, why isn't this done already? And so I think what Kalani just decided to do was not to leave or not to actually pursue other positions. But it's like when you're working your job and you've been there for 10 years and you want a raise, well, and your boss won't give it to you, what are you going to do? You're going to go and create some leverage. You're going to go and say, hey, I got this other position that's willing to pay me X. And, are you or are you not willing to pay me that? Because I'd love to be here. That's exactly what Kalani did, and I think it was a brilliant strategy, and I think he did what he had to do to get his staff paid, and I respect that on a very high level. Now, the thing is the thing you also have to understand is if you're Kalani, is your average, with all due respect, your average football fan, somebody who isn't reading the des or reading the news and following all the details about how all this went down, is just going to see Kalani Sitake extension, everything's great. So my point with that is just to say that now that the BYU fan base sees, hey, we got the coach extended and BYU's putting out videos, okay, well, again, now it's time to go out and handle your business on the field. And I think that's what's so important about this thing, because the last thing you want to be said about Kalani in this extension in 3 seasons, let's say, is that, well, since before the extension, he went 21-3 in his last 3 seasons. After the extension, he was, a 500 coach or, whatever they would say. That's the last thing you want if you're Kalani Sitake. So I just think that yes, this bowl game is important, but more important is these seasons coming up that are leading you into the Big 12. That is crucial.
Yeah, and I guess the struggle that I have with it is that we don't need to know every detail of this contract.
Mm-hmm.
But what you do need to know is that very clearly the reset button has been hit. And the expectations have to go up at BYU because you're going into the Big 12. If we learned anything from Utah's, maturation, road through the Pac-12 to winning a Pac-12 championship a decade later, it's a very difficult hill to climb. And it's not easy to leave independence behind when you totally control your schedule. You control your destiny, for better or for worse. You control your bowl assignment.
Mm-hmm.
There are a lot of reasons to embrace going into the Big 12, obviously. But there's also a lot of challenges with that. Having Kalani there, recruiting at the level that he's recruiting at, coaching up, developing the talent they're bringing in, this was a no-brainer for BYU to get this done. But now expectations have to go up.
Mm-hmm.
And now winning has to be the priority. And I think it will be. I think, depending on when this move to the Big 12 actually is executed, because there's a lot of people who think it could be next year, the year after. Depending on when that happens, I think you're going to see that BYU will be able to compete at the top of this conference, the Big 12, sooner rather than later. I think the Big 12 is an easier climb than the Pac-12 was.
Mm-hmm.
I think BYU is more established than Utah was when Utah was going into the Pac-12. I think there were a lot more challenges at that point in college football. Now, I think the other thing that we have to talk about is this NIL investigation that the NCAA has kicked off with Built Bar and BYU. I mean, I think these are very challenging times. The absolute last thing that BYU can afford is any kind of sanction or penalties coming from this NIL deal that's being investigated. I mean, these are the perils when something changes. And I don't know, how concerned about that are you?
Yeah, I mean, I would be concerned, no doubt, and I am concerned. I don't think that, I'm not sitting here saying that I think, BYU, is shady or did things that they shouldn't have done. But, I mean, they were basically the first program out there to land a program-wide NIL deal. And yes, there's no doubt about it. They've been recruiting off of it. So, I guess it makes sense to investigate the program to see if there was some kind of shadiness happening. But, I agree with you. The last thing they need is this kind of investigation. And I really just hope that, whenever this investigation ends or concludes, because we've seen, we all know that college athletic investigations can go on for, what seems like an endless amount of time. So first of all, I hope that this investigation doesn't go on for like 6 months or something. I hope that this is like a month to 6 week thing. Secondly, they can't afford that right now. So I really hope that at the end of the investigation, it comes out that no wrongdoing was done and everything's good. And then thirdly, when that happens, let's move on. Let's move on. Let's get on to the business of winning football, because it seems like for BYU, winning cures all. I mean, I know that that's a thing in sports, but like specifically for an independent in BYU right now, winning cures all. I mean, how happy and how chipper was the fan base when you won all these games, when you started the season, whatever they did. I think it was like 4-0 or whatever the run
Yeah.
was. Like how happy was everybody? And then you lose one game in Boise State, and all of a sudden the season's over. So I just think that with the NIL investigation, hopefully it comes out that they didn't do anything wrong. You can get back on the field, start winning football games, and everything is good to go.
I think it's a huge issue.
Yeah.
I think BYU, part of the problem when you're an innovator like BYU is, and there's no question they were innovative in NIL. I agree with you. I think it brings some unwanted attention, but they are innocent until proven guilty. I mean, they are. I think BYU. My guess is BYU has done nothing wrong, and if they did something wrong, it was probably an innocent mistake. You can't tell me that BYU didn't study every letter of that law before they went out and set the world on fire with Built Bar.
Yeah.
I just don't believe that BYU would act that way. I don't believe Tom Homo would have business done that way. I mean, you're talking about changing the lives of athletes at BYU, ending walk-ons for BYU football. That's not something you take lightly. That's not something you do willy-nilly. And I have all the faith in the world. I think Tom Homo is one of the top athletic administrators in all of college athletics. So my guess is that if there was a mistake, an error, I can't believe that BYU takes a significant penalty on this. I mean, it's new ground. There's not a lot of black and white paper that is telling you how to act, how to navigate the waters of NIL. So I have a real problem believing that this would be something significant as far as penalties or, I don't even know what you could do. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I just hope that it's not a dark cloud over the program. That's what you don't want. You don't want, all of this like doom and gloom around the program. I mean, think about, again, this wasn't an investigation, but just think about the Rolovich situation at Washington State before that got handled. I mean, that was like that hey, we're going to lose our coach and all this different stuff that was going on alongside, like parallel to trying to win football games. And that's the thing. I think, you just got to understand that winning football games takes literally every person in the building. I mean, it literally takes every person in the program, even the people that create the content, even the people that aren't in the film study. Like, everybody plays a role. And I know that gets said a lot in sports, and it's cliche and everything, but it's so true. Like think about it. If you have not if they do, you have an NIL investigation going on through the program. That's in the back of everybody's minds. In addition to, hey, where am I supposed to be on the field? In addition to, hey, what does this coverage look like? What is UAB doing here or there? So I just think that the last thing you want, if you're BYU, is to have this NIL investigation turn into something bigger than it really should be. Now, I agree with you. This does seem like something where, if, let's say, they did make a mistake, let's say it was even an egregious mistake, I still don't think that they would take a big penalty. I agree with you on that, because it is such a new thing. This isn't like, it doesn't appear to be anyway, something that would be related to, recruiting or them like cheating to get players or paying players or whatever. It doesn't appear that they would have done that, but that would be the only thing that I could see that would be like really like heavy, really that would warrant heavy penalties, I guess.
Yeah, it's not. And I think the thing that the NCAA looks for is malice. I think they look for reckless behavior. I think the NCAA looks at what your intention was. Your intention matters. We saw this through the basketball bribery wiretap scandal. It's what you said is used against you. What's in black and white is used against you. And I think if you look at the face value of the Built Bar deal, there is no question that the best of intentions were put forward there. Now, is there absolute capitalism at the middle of it? Well, yeah. Why wouldn't there be? And why is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
It certainly is not. I mean, for Built Bar, it's a great deal. For BYU, it's a great deal. Everybody wins. To me, I don't think that BYU had any malice at all in their actions, and I just don't see an avenue for them to take a heavy suspension.
Yeah, and I think that I like what you said there about, why is capitalism a bad thing in college athletics? That's the whole point of NIL. That literally
That's right.
that is the beginning and the end. I mean, it is, hey, you're a big time college athlete. We want to allow you to make money off T-shirts with your face on them. Like that's the whole point. And so I don't think that there's anything. Again, I don't know all the details. We don't know exactly specifically the reason for the investigation, like what kind of popped up, but at the end of the day, this benefits a lot of people. So I don't know, man. The last thing I want to see, like I said, is for this to turn into some kind of storm and be a dark cloud and bring penalties to the program and like that's just not that would be so poorly timed. For where they are. So that's the last thing I want to see.
Yeah, I can't believe that happens. I
Yeah.
just maybe I'm naive. I don't know.
Well, I just think we don't know. Like, my biggest concern with the whole thing is we just don't specifically know why, like, what prompted them to look. That's the biggest thing. What was it just purely, hey, this is like the first major NIL deal for a program. Let's take a look at this and see, what exactly went down. If that's all it is, then they're fine.
Yeah, no big deal.
Then it's no
No
big
problem.
deal. But then on the flip side of the coin, if it's, hey, we saw something that suggested that you only did this deal for, for recruiting purposes and like there was some shadiness, that's a problem. So that's why I say my concern, just stems from the fact like the unknown. I don't know why they're looking, but I also agree with you. I have a hard time believing that an institution like BYU didn't read every line by line,
Absolutely.
outlook of how NIL works and follow it to the letter. So that's why I say if you're a BYU fan, I think you can take some comfort in assuming that they wouldn't be getting any kind of major thing.
And there's a catchphrase in Tom We Trust, right? In Tom
Mhm.
Homo We Trust.
Yeah.
Well, I think you have to trust here too.
Yeah, and you
Because
have no reason not to.
I
Yeah.
just don't see that. I don't see him as reckless.